The AoE meta is finally starting to fizzle out a bit, and hopefully that dumb horse gets decommissioned from any future MOC as well, cause it just might be the worst designed enemy in the entire game. But anyways, as we enter into the second half of 3.x and slowly approach 4.x, I wanted to kind of look at what the best roadmaps would be for all sorts of players. Day 1, returning, and even new players who probably got here because of the Fate collab. Right off the bat, I won't recommend getting either Blade or Jingliu, but an argument can be made for Firefly looking at the possible resurgence of a break meta in the future. I'll let you decide whether or not it's worth it, but if you want to get her, E2 is highly recommended and almost mandatory. Also, no idea how long the Fate collab is gonna last, but the devs should definitely inform us ahead of time, so you can slowly build pity on it as you pull for other characters moving forward. Alright, 3.5 is going to be introducing Cerydra and Hyslins, but along with them, it's confirmed that Kafka and Silverwolf are going to be getting their reruns this patch. And for all the new players out there, this is the patch you'll be looking at. If you're able to get both Kafka and Hyslins, that would be perfect. Black Swan can easily be overlooked here, but at the same time, because Hyslins now has the utility to detonate dots, albeit not as often as Kafka can, you can actually snag either one of the two and run a 4-star like Sampo. No use trying to complete everything in the game as a new player, right? So this should be fine. Dot can also work with Robin, Ronmei, and Tribi. I don't know if she's accessible right now as the gold material used to redeem characters may or may not still be in the mail. But if it is, then do make sure to share with us down in the comments, as that would make Ronmei really accessible for this team. Finally, for sustains, Gallagher is really all you need and you're set to go. But Woho has proven herself time and time again to be very resistant to power creep, so if you do see her later on, she might be a good pickup for this team. Silverwolf on the other hand is really good now with the buff she got, and with her E1 you'll be able to spam ultimates throughout the battle. She's a staple debuffer, and you could choose between her and Cypher as an addition to your account, depending on your specific needs. Like how Cypher would be a better addition to a Fei Xiao team instead of Silverwolf. Okay, now for Cerydra. To make things quick, you're only gonna want to pull her if you've been playing the game for a while and have either an Axa or phainon. There are several reasons why I'd recommend someone to skip her, but just to call out a few, if you're not planning to use your phainon long term, then you could definitely skip her as there are just better supports currently in the game and also on the way. At the same time, if you're optimistic about how she would fare with future skill DPSs, my verdict would still be to skip her. The increase she provides to Anaxa is already a clear example for this. Current and future supports would still perform within the same threshold, if not better than her in some scenarios for those skill DPSs, so there's no point in pulling for her for the future. Even on the topic of phainon, we still have two future characters that we could speculate to provide meaningful buffs to him whilst not being a liability to your account in general. So even if your account is in the situation where it would be a no-brainer to pull for her, arguments can still be made for skipping her. This character is really something else. Alright, onto 3.6, which is speculated to have March 7th and Dan Heng in new forms. Finally, we're getting new forms for our Express crew. And specifically March 7th, who actually hasn't gotten a 5-star form yet. But before we dive into them, from the recent reruns we can speculate that Mayday, Chapterz, and Hyacinth might be getting their reruns soon. Mayday simply because he's next in line after Tribi, but for Hyacinth and Chapterz there is one major reason for this, and that's the potential synergy that they might have with March 7th. The Arcadia Relic set has already made it clear that in the near future, we would get a team that could have 8 characters on the field, as the other end of the buff is yet to be fully achieved with any reasonable team comp we have so far. If you think about it, this is where Chapterz's lack of synergy with Sunday and great synergy with RMC really starts to make sense, as with Sunday you wouldn't be able to max out the Arcadia buff as well. Basically, the team is gonna look something like Chapterz, RMC, Hyacinth, and March 7th, all with their member sprites on the field, totaling up to 8 allies. Perhaps Aglaya may be able to slot into the team in place of Chapterz, but I'm really confident that Sunday will remain her best in slot. Okay, but what if you don't want to get Chapterz and Hyacinth but still want March 7th? Well, right now I can't say for sure whether or not she can be run as both a sub and main DPS, although I strongly believe she'll be able to hold her own as a main DPS. The only thing is that if she's not HP scaling, then she might not really have a good planner set to use. But when the time comes, I'll dive more into her. Kit. Okay, now on to Heng, and he's one of the two characters I believe will provide similar value to phainon whilst not being a liability to your account instead of cerydra. Heng is speculated to be a sustain character who can apparently give memo sprites to his teammates. phainon did make it all the way through beta whilst having a trace dedicated to sustains in his kit, and the devs definitely didn't put that there for nothing. Basically, I believe the best case scenario here would be a situation where phainon would carry the memo sprite Heng provides with him into his ultimate, which would make him more versatile and improve his resistance towards boss mechanics that may want to screw him over later on. I still do believe his sustainless teams will be the best for pure damage potential, but with the sustains we've gotten recently like Hyacinth, this route is definitely a reasonable one. So at this point, new players might want to be looking for a second team. And so I'd suggest to pull for Hyacinth as your first limited support, and then either Castris or March 7th to go with her. That is, if March 7th can be run as a main DPS. An upcoming account would be fine with one limited support at this point, as Gallagher can easily take on the role of supporting your second team. But if you've got the funds, Aventrine and Hoho should still be good pickups when they get their reruns later on. I mean, Heng is also there as well, but I don't think anyone's gonna be pulling 3 limited characters in a single patch. That's 3.6 covered, which leaves us with 3.7. Seeing as we've never actually had a 0.8 patch, I'm not sure they do one here as well, so we're just gonna be assuming that 3.7 is the last one. In the meantime, if you're enjoying the video so far, giving me a like and maybe a sub would be greatly appreciated. But anyways, at this point, I don't really have a good idea of who's gonna be releasing in 3.7, apart from Cyrene, who's basically guaranteed as the final character from Euphorius. Although there's a bit of speculation that Constance from the Annihilation Gang may also be appearing as an expansion to Break, but there isn't much I can say here to add to this. I feel like we may be seeing Polka around these later parts of 3.x, seeing as she's intertwined with all the Euphorius drama, but even my gut tells me that we're still a long way from her being playable. Perhaps we'll just get to see what she looks like as she drags Lygos into the void to give him his due punishment. Okay, now let's talk about Cyrene. Who's she gonna be for, who should be pulling for her, etc. Well, just to keep things simple, everyone should be pulling for her. We're talking about an Alicia XP, possible Emanator of the Remembrance, and also our first support Emanator, I think. And if that isn't enough to convince you, the successor to RMC, because as we go into 4.x, we'll obviously be getting a new path and RMC may not be as usable. Unless that path ends up being horrible, which I don't think is ever gonna happen at this point. Cyrene is speculated to be a Remembrance support who can buff allies whilst also having memo sprites that also buff allies. She's also speculated to be able to work well with all the flame chasers. Hence the second character that provides something meaningful to phainon whilst not being a liability to your account. If the devs give her a bit of personal damage like Hyacinth, then this would easily be the most stacked support in the entire game. Regardless of what type of player you are, you should definitely be preparing for her in whatever way you can, as she could easily be the next Sunday, being wanted on several teams. But we'll leave the rest of this discussion for when she actually does get closer to releasing. Okay, but before we wrap things up, what are the possible reruns we may be getting in this patch? Anaxa and Cypher are next in line for the Flame Chasers, so we're just gonna be putting them out there. Seeing as buffing characters isn't gonna be a one-time thing, we can also expect to see characters like Sealy, Argenti, Heng, and maybe even Topaz being in the next batch of buffed characters. Apart from that, Robin Facial, Jade, and Lingsha all seem to be due for a rerun. Now, 2 more characters I want to throw out there are Boothill and Rappa. Not just because they haven't had a rerun in a while, but also because of Constance, which I mentioned earlier, and 4.x possibly being a break meta. And so yeah, do make sure to tell me what your pulling plans would be down in the comments, and also don't hesitate to ask if your situation is specific or something like that. I tried to cover what would be reasonable for the time frame, but if you want to do some speculation for 4.x, then you're free to do so. Anyways, with that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one.